How does Airbnb determine what listings it shows on the first page? And why is it that some guests view your listing but decide not to book?
We found ourselves asking the same question when one of our listings was struggling a little bit to get some bookings. But we made a few tweaks and were able to increase both how often our listing showed up on the first page of Airbnb's search results and how often people who viewed the listing converted into bookings.
So be sure to watch this entire video if you want to learn how to do the same for your Airbnb.
One of our listings, the Desert Daisy House, was lagging a bit behind some of our other properties in terms of revenue and occupancy. And as we did some digging into the data, we realized that for some weird reason, the listing was very rarely showing up on the first page of Airbnb's search results. And when it did show up, people just weren't booking it.
So we had two objectives with the Desert Daisy House. The first objective was increasing how often the property showed up on the first page of the search results. And the second objective was increasing how often people that viewed the listing actually converted into bookings.
So here's where the metrics for the Desert Daisy House were in April. Our overall conversion rate was 0.6%. Our first page search impression rate was 27.8%. Our search to listing conversion rate was 7.79%. And our listing to booking conversion rate was 0.79%. We were able to pretty dramatically improve each of those figures, and we'll share the current numbers for that property at the end of this video, so just be sure to stick around until the end.
We leveraged several strategies to make that happen. But before we get into strategies, let's just clarify a few things. So Airbnb, like most other tech companies, doesn't share the exact science behind their search algorithm or how they decide which listing shows up on the first page. It's super top secret, but instead, Airbnb only shares some general guidelines on how they determine which listings show up in the first page of the search results.
Airbnb does specifically mention a handful of factors that impact how often your listing will show up on the first page of the search results. But instead of us trying to kind of focus on all of them, we chose 3 that we felt would have the biggest impact.
The first was adjusting our pricing so that the algorithm preferred our listing over the other properties that we were competing with.
The second thing we focused on was increasing our number of 5-star reviews. Now, obviously, the more of these you have, the better for your listing.
And the last thing we focused on was improving our clicks in search results, which basically is a number that tells you how well your listing is converting viewers into paying customers.
So our first strategy was to adjust our pricing so Airbnb preferred our listing over our competitors' listings. Now remember, Airbnb initially gained so much popularity because travelers were able to find really nice places to stay for cheaper than what a hotel would cost. Now things have definitely changed since then, and now Airbnbs are often more expensive than hotels, but Airbnb still tries to live up to that cheaper than a hotel label it was given, and it really strives to give guests the cheapest accommodations possible. Now because of this, Airbnb will prioritize listings that have lower prices over those that have higher prices.
So knowing that Airbnb preferred cheaper listings, our strategy was to slightly decrease our base pricing inside of our pricing tool. But what happened next was the really cool part.
Now, it'd be natural to assume that since we lowered our prices, our revenue would go down as well. But the cool part is that the exact opposite actually happened. Now, one of the metrics that we track within our business is called RevPar. And RevPar stands for revenue per available room. And it basically combines your daily average rates with your occupancy. And what we saw was our RevPar increased month over month instead of decreasing. Now, we did see a bit of a dip in the month of May, but that's more because of seasonality in our market. And we kind of saw that similar trend across all of our portfolio. But overall, this price decrease had a positive impact on revenue. Now, how could this have happened? How could we have reduced our daily rate but increased our revenue?
Two things happened. First, since our rates were lower, Airbnb started to show our listing to more people, which then led to higher occupancy rates, which in turn led to more bookings. And second, because the listing started booking faster, we didn't have to offer as many last-minute discounts to try to fill the holes in our calendar.
Before we move on to the next strategy, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Also connect with us on Instagram. I'm at Tony J. Robinson and she's at Sarah Rad.
Our next strategy was to increase the number of 5-star reviews the listing had. The benefit of doing this was twofold.
First, we know that Airbnb prefers to show listings that have more 5-star reviews. And second, more 5-star reviews will help encourage people who are viewing your listing to convert to actual bookings. Now, the problem was when this listing first went live, we received a few handful of kind of not the best reviews.
So we knew that in order to increase our search rankings and to convert more people into bookings, we were gonna have to generate more 5-star reviews.
Duh.
And honestly, I'm really proud of how we went about increasing our number of 5-star reviews because it's a process that we can teach to you all and that every single one of you can replicate as well.
But before we share that process, let's read through some of the reviews we got for this property early on.
Here's a review from one of our few first guests. Sarah's place was so cute. The hammocks in the fire pit were our favorite parts. The view of the stars were spectacular. So this review starts off pretty good, right?
Yeah.
But here's where it goes south. The house is pretty far out in the middle of nowhere, and the dirt roads leading to the house are tremendously bumpy.
That guest then went on to give us an overall score of 4 out of 5 stars.
But even worse, they rated us a 4 on location and a 3 on value. A score of 3 is a terrible, terrible score as an Airbnb host.
We had another guest that gave us an overall rating of 3, which was one of our worst scores across all of our Airbnbs.
She gave us a 5 on all of the subcategories, but scored us low in the check-in process because there was an issue with her entry code. She also recommended that we add a small fenced-in area situated in the back for the dogs to play.
Now, there are 2 ways you can respond to poor reviews for your property. If it's valid feedback, then you should just make the change to your property. If you've got an uncomfortable mattress, let's say, that every guest has complained about, then just change the mattress. But sometimes negative comments can be fixed simply by setting the correct expectations for the guests up front.
So here's how we leverage these negative reviews to actually generate more 5-star reviews for guests that came in the future. Now, for the guests that commented on the tremendously bumpy road, we changed our listing description to clearly call out the bumpy road as part of the journey to get to the property, right? We turned it into a positive. And we changed the way that we describe the location to clarify that it's in a super remote and quiet location.
Now notice that neither of these changes required us to make changes to the property itself. The only thing we changed was the expectation that the guest had when booking our property.
And that's the secret to getting a 5-star review. The guest's expectation of your property has to match their reality. So as long as you, as the host, ensure your listing is the most accurate representation of the actual physical space your guests will be in, you'll be well on your way to making sure they have a 5-star stay.
So anytime a guest mentions something in their review that could be solved by setting the proper expectations, we would make updates to our listing or the guidebook or the automated messages to ensure the guest didn't walk into any surprises during their stay.
Now, this one little strategy has made a huge difference in the reviews of this property. In fact, it's been several months since we've had anything less than a 5-star review on this very same house.
So the first 2 strategies focused on helping people find our listing by increasing how often we showed up on the first page.
But the last strategy we'll share with you all helped us convert the people who viewed our listing into actual paying customers.
We focused on a few things to increase that conversion rate. First was our title.
Now, your Airbnb title has a very, very important job. It needs to stand out amongst a sea of other Airbnb listings, and it needs to communicate what makes your listing unique.
So we played around with a few different titles, but we saw the best results with this. Stargazing retreat, 2 acres, outdoor tub, hammocks.
Our next focus was our cover photo. This is the one that guests see when they're searching for listings. It's the one that shows up, the main photo. And we got feedback in 2 ways. The first way was just kind of looking at it ourselves, seeing what we liked. We also talked to friends and family. But a big thing that we did was we leveraged the feedback from the guests, right? If we made a change to a photo and then we saw no bookings or no increase in bookings, then maybe it wasn't the one. But when we started to see an increase in bookings after a photo change, or at least an increase in views, then we knew that we had kind of stumbled upon the right photo.
But we've landed on one that we feel encompasses the best parts of the property. We also continued to update and tweak the property description.
We started calling the property a desert retreat, and we really tried to hype up the fact that this property was kind of in a remote location so that it comes across as a benefit as opposed to a negative, as one of the reviews mentioned.
All of these little changes over time helped us better communicate the value that our listing would provide to a potential guest and ultimately improved our conversion rate.
So those are the 3 strategies. But now for the big question, where did we end up? Now, our overall conversion rates went from a 0.06% to a 0.86%. Our first paid search impression rate went from 27.8% to 34.9%. Our search to listing conversion rate went from 7.79 to a crazy 41.42%. And last but not least, our listing to booking conversion rate went from 0.79% all the way up to 2.08%, which is an 89.89% increase in booking conversions.
So that's it. Those are the strategies that we leverage to improve the performance for our Airbnb listing. Now we're continuing to tweak and try new things, and as we find more things that work, we'll be sure to share them here on the channel.
Now drop a comment and let us know what strategies you've used to increase your listings performance.
So that's it for today, guys. I'm Sarah.
I'm Tony.
And we are the Real Estate Robinsons.